What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. It's Dave with Gen3D Tech. Today we are taking a look at the HyperX Pulsefire Haste 2. We are lucky enough to get a hold of one of these. Some poor HP employee leaked one out on the HP store on eBay, and we were lucky enough to get one. So his misfortune is our benefit. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, let's have a moment of silence for that poor HP employee who probably lost his job for releasing these early to the HP store on eBay. Now, in the past, I've tried to get review samples from HyperX, but so far I've had no luck. Last year, when I reviewed the original Pulsefire Haste wireless, I was actually able to get out the very first review, even though I wasn't on the review list and I was accused of breaking the review embargo, but you can't break an NDA if you're not given a review sample. So I found a way to get that one first, and I found a way to get this one first also. So HyperX, if you're watching this review, you might as well put me on your review list, because one way or another, every time you release this mouse, I'm going to be the first one out of the gate. So as you can see, the big change is that they got rid of the holes that were in the original Haste wireless. It's a big welcome change in 2023 to not have holes, which is the direction the majority of the mouse makers are going right now. I think it would be a step backwards to go back to the holes. Glorious. Shape-wise, it's almost identical. It's hard to tell on camera, but there is a slight difference between the two mice. There's a little bit of less of a curve in the new Haste 2. Lengthwise, they're the same. They use the same size skates, so if you have some for this, you could definitely use them on here too. But the again, it's also hard to tell on camera, but the skates are different. These are more like Tiger Ace type skates, much smoother than the old skates. A big improvement in my opinion. You can see there's no holes on the bottom either. Same spot to store your dongle. Now the other big change, which you can't see physically, is the sensor. So one of the big criticisms of the last Haste wireless was that it sported the 3335 sensor, and last year that was really an outdated sensor. This really should have came out with the 3370 sensor, even though they did do a really good job of implementing that sensor on this mouse. And for a lot of people at the end of the year, this was a mouse that was definitely on the verge of breaking into the people's top 10 or top 5 mice list. So it was definitely a recommended mouse for a lot of people, mostly due to the excellent shape and the good implementation of the sensor it did have, but it's not perfect. The 3335 definitely has some issues on certain pads, specifically like the Vancer Ice, for example. It's just not as good as it could have been. I think the holes were forgivable, especially during the time that it came out. That was kind of still the rage. But if they'd come out with a 3370 sensor, I think this definitely would have ended up in almost everyone's top 5 list. Instead, it just kind of was edged out most of the time. But for the money, it was definitely a good value of a mouse. So in 2023, they're basically doing a do-over. And this time, we get their new HyperX 26K sensor is what they're calling it, which I'm pretty sure is based off of the 3395 sensor. I believe it's a custom version of that sensor. It adds things like motion smoothing. And I could definitely tell a big difference in the performance of this sensor over the old one. Now, one of the other things that they added is Bluetooth support, which for most gamers is not a big deal, but it's definitely a useful thing, especially if you want to conserve battery life. Battery is also an area that they upgraded. It has up to 100 hours battery. I assume that's if you're using Bluetooth. Typically, it's going to be about half of that when you're not using Bluetooth. So probably expect around 50 hours of battery life would be my guess. But I haven't used it long enough to wear out a charge yet. Now, as far as button positions, they're pretty much the same. One of the differences in the buttons, as you can see, is the button comes over here, and we don't have this separator right here on the new one. The button overlaps. Now, one of the areas where I think it was kind of downgraded, as you can see, there's not a lot of side play on the buttons on the old Haste. There's slightly more side play on the Haste 2 as opposed to the Haste 1. But it's definitely nothing that you actually feel in-game. The scroll wheel is pretty much the same scroll wheel as before. So if you like the scroll wheel, then you'll like this. If you didn't, then you're not going to like this one. The other big change is they used different switches. So in the original Haste Wireless, they used TTC Gold, which had a very light click. Some people actually don't like them. They think they're a little bit mushy, but they're very spammable and light, and people definitely were fans of them. It was kind of a love-hate thing. Now with this one, they have their own HyperX branded switches, and they're rated up to 100 million clicks. And I find the clicks a lot firmer, but just as spammable. They have really good feedback. I actually like these clicks quite a bit. The side buttons are definitely not the best. They feel like microdots, if I had to guess. They have a good amount of pre-travel. Post-travel is not bad. They feel pretty much the same as the previous one, so if you are a owner of the first Haste and you don't mind the side buttons, then you're pretty much going to get the same thing over here. It's definitely not a deal breaker for me. It's just not something that it highlights. Now, one of the trends is moving the DPI button to the bottom of mice, but HyperX has kept it on the top. It is a very small button, and I've never accidentally hit this button. And if you don't like it as a DPI button, you can definitely remap it to whatever you want. There's quite a few options for remapping in their software. Branding wise, you still got the HyperX logo on the left side, which you also have on the old one. But on the old one, since it was honeycomb, you couldn't really put a logo back there, and now they have it on the back of the new one. So in the box, you also get some extra goodies. You get an extra set of PTFE feet, which like I said, are really nice PTFE feet, or some of the nicest PTFE feet that I've used. The other thing I'd like to mention is on glass pads, these PTFE feet are really smooth. A lot of PTFE feet and mice are just scratchy on a glass pad, but this works really well. As you can hear, no sounds. It's just butter smooth on glass. And one of the other areas that they improved on is the grips that it comes with. You also got grips with the first one, but they're much thicker. These are very thin grips. Now, I usually don't use grips, but these are thin enough that I may actually consider using them. If you're a fan of grips, it's definitely an option. Now, as far as the coating, I was also asked if the coatings change, and it feels slightly smoother than before, but it's still pretty grippy, I think. If you liked the coating before, I think you'll like this one. And if you thought the other one was just a hair too gritty, this one's just a hair smoother, but they're very close. Now, of course, both mice have RGB, but on this mouse, the RGB really only shines through the scroll wheel, whereas on the other one, there was definitely a lot more RGB on it. So if you're a fan of RGB, you might not be happy about that. But honestly, they could have lost that, and if there was any weight savings to be gained, that would have been cool. And as far as weight, the mouse is 60 grams, and that's also what I got on my scale. But we'll go ahead and weigh it real quick just to verify that. So the original one was 60 grams. And the new one, also 60 grams. So weight did not change at all. Another thing that might be worth mentioning is on the box, it claims that you can use this mouse on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X, and Xbox One, besides PC, of course. Funny thing, it doesn't mention Mac support. But I thought I'd just throw that out there, because I do believe there are some console users that buy this mouse intentionally. It also comes with a 2-year warranty, in case you care about that. Another thing I'd like to mention is the price that was talked about over the last couple months when they first announced it, was that it was going to be $79, but I did have to pay $89 for it on the HP store on eBay. Now, I don't know if that's the actual correct price, but since it came from the HP store, I'm willing to believe that that's the price that it will be. However, I know that there's a bunch of codes for HyperX out there, and I'll try and find some and put them in the description when it goes on sale at the official store. I know last time there was a code for $15 off, so that could definitely help bring the price down. And again, I'll try and find a code and put it in the description of the video when this thing goes on sale. It should also be on sale on Amazon, most likely. So at $89, that's still a decent amount of money. It kind of puts it in the same range as Lamzu and Pulsar. And I believe this uses the same MCU as those mice. So expect around the same type of performance. I did not notice any kind of latency issues in game, and it definitely worked well for me. I've done a bunch of testing the last couple days, and I was also testing Darmio Shark M4, which is that Air 58 shape, and then the glorious Model O Pro. And I switched between all three of these mice while I was testing the last couple days. And definitely I could notice a performance difference when I was using the Haste 2. It was definitely my favorite of the three. And that's not to say that this mouse is not better than other mice. These are the ones I was directly comparing it to during the last couple days. So shape-wise, as you can see, it's a symmetrical mouse. And it's not a huge mouse. It's not a tiny mouse. It's kind of a medium-sized mouse. Like this is the X2 Mini. So you can see it's a good bit bigger than the X2 Mini. There's a Starlight Medium. You can see it's about the same size. It's actually somewhat comparable to the Starlight 12. Another mouse that it's somewhat comparable to is the Vaxi XE. It definitely feels different in your hand, but size-wise, it's very similar, and it has a similar feel. Here's a comparison with the Vansar Caster and the Deluxe M800 Pro. Now, this is probably HyperX's flagship mouse for the year. And the one thing that it is missing is 4K support. It would be nice if they do add an updated version of this with 4K support at some point. Maybe they do have one in the works and I just haven't heard about it, but that would be cool. But it's not necessarily. I think that 4K is definitely a measurable difference, but for most people, unless you're just in competitive gaming, this is going to serve you very well. Now, as far as grip styles, claw tends to work best for this mouse for me. And you can fingertip this mouse at 60 grams. It's pretty light and the size is not terribly big. And you can actually palm this mouse. So I think you can use all three grip styles with it, which I think is why it's a very popular mouse. Haste Wireless has a very rabid following, and it's understandable. It's a very enjoyable shape, and I perform really well with this mouse. And this version of this mouse is definitely a big upgrade in my opinion. The sensor performed flawlessly for me. The feet are great out of the box. The shape is really good. The coating's good. The clicks are good. The scroll wheel's okay. It's a little light. I would have liked it to be a little bit heavier with some better stepping. And the side buttons are just okay. Now, a sign of a good mouse for me is one that I'm going to continue to use for leisure gaming whenever I do get to do that, which is not often. But for sure, right now, I think I'm going to be using this mouse a lot. So right now, this is a mouse I'm definitely enjoying using. And if you are a fan of the original Haste wireless, then I think this is definitely an automatic buy. Now, is there other mice out there that are better? Yes, and I would say most of those mice are going to be a lot more expensive. So under $100, and if you don't care about 4K and you like this shape, then I think this is definitely a win for HyperX. Also, this comes in white and black, as you can see. Typically, the white color will add about 1 gram to the weight, but I don't have it to measure it. So when you put it, if you have a scale, it might come out at 61 if you get the white version. All right, so let's do a sound test and then we'll take a look at the software. So first off, this is the software. You can get it on the Microsoft App Store. And one of the things I noticed is that you have to run a firmware update before you can get into the settings. But once you're in there, it's pretty simple. So right here, this is where you can mess with the RGB effects. But like I said, really the only RGB is on the scroll wheel, so it's real limited. So you could probably turn that off. Right here, you got the battery indicator. It's at 78%, and that's 2 good long gaming sessions. So I put a decent amount of hours on that, and it's definitely held up well. Right here, you can map out the buttons. For example, if you wanted to remap the DPI button, you just click that. And let's say you wanted to make it a pause play button, you could do that. Right here is the sensor settings. You got your DPI steppings that are color coded, and these are the defaults. I use 1600. You can add additional levels if you want. And then right here, this is the brightness. You can set at 100. And as you can see under options, you got the polling rate, which is set to 1K by default. And then the liftoff distance defaults to low 1 millimeter. And then right here, you can set different presets and save them here if you want. Very basic software, easy to use. That's about it. So in conclusion, I definitely recommend the Pulsefire Haste 2. I think it's an exceptional mouse with very good performance, very good build quality. The shape is excellent. It's definitely a goated shape. And I believe HyperX is definitely moving in the right direction with this version of their mouse. If you're an FPS gamer, I definitely think this should be a mouse you should consider. And if you already own the original Haste one, then I definitely recommend upgrading to the Haste 2 because you're going to love this mouse way more than you loved the original one. Unless for some reason you like the holes, and there are some people that do, and I think it's mainly due to sweating issues. But other than that, I don't see any reason to stick with that mouse in 2023. Great sensor, goated shape, and while I do agree, $89 seems a little bit high. I think this should probably be more $79 like they originally announced, but maybe that's the case. I'm not sure. And again, there may be some codes to get the price down. I believe you can also find HyperX products on sale quite often, so you don't necessarily have to grab it right away. I'm sure there'll be some sales throughout the year. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this review and found it informative. A like would definitely be appreciated. It definitely helps the channel grow. And if you haven't subbed yet, consider subbing. I have lots of great mice coming, and I'm always showing off new Chinese mice lately. So if you want to see some mice that you're not going to see anywhere else, or you'll see it on my channel first, and then other channels like Boardsy's channel later on. Then definitely keep checking my channel, because I got a lot of really cool stuff coming out. And again, stuff that you're probably not going to see anywhere else, or you will see it here first. Anyways, that's it, and I'll see you next time. Later.